Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Sodium Chloride, Sodium Chloride, Sodium Chloride. Hey, goodbye, a Sparky's Tale. This is a bit of a read, hey. The title will make sense at some stage, I promise. I'll explain some stuff as we go, but as always, there's a glossary at the end. Some years ago I was working FIFO, fly in, fly out, at a mine. Leave the small-ish town I was living in at the time, fly to the mine for 2 weeks, fly back home for 1 week. Rinse, repeat. As a dual-trade Sparky, instro, electrician, instrumentation electrician, it was big hours and lots of beer tickets. With all the fat stacks of bills I was being paid, I decided to buy a fixer-upper house that I could work on during my weeks off, with a view to selling at some stage. My construction industry mates would help, on occasion, for beer and barbecue. This is the way. The house was an old wooden single-story, 4-bed, 1.5 bath affair, on a half-acre, 2,000 SQM, 21,780 SQF, with a big shed. Seriously, the shed was a big 4-bay job with power and water. And a John Deere ride-on mower for all the green shit. It had come up at an estate sale, the previous owners having been there for over 25 years. It needed the usual paint and mending, a fair bit of modernization, a bit of renovation, but was overall a solid house in an established neighborhood. All the blocks around there were half-acre. The first day I was moving in, I hadn't been there for an hour, and had one of the neighbors visiting. There are 2 types of neighbors who come over within an hour. The "here is a casserole, welcome to the neighborhood" type, and the Bill and Jenny type. Bill and Jenny, antagonists. Bill was a retired barrister, Jenny, a retired surgeon. A barrister is a highly skilled specialist solicitor who wears a wig. A solicitor is a regular lawyer who doesn't wear a wig. I had to ask a barrister some questions regarding an upcoming court case once. Thought I'd just ring them up. 30 minutes on the phone cost me $500. Wigs are no joke. Anyway, Bill and Jenny came over with the "hello peasant, this is a quiet neighborhood" yada yada nonsense. They'd been at their house for over 20 years. I was courteous and respectful, explained that I would be in and out due to being a FIFO contractor, didn't party, and the only noise would be fixing up the house. Well, Bill and Jenny were most assuredly not impressed. I don't know if it was the contractor bit, or the fixing up the house bit, but I don't think their faces could have looked any more sour, horrified if I'd leant in and given them a big lick up the face. I received a legal brief on the noise laws, and repeated assertions that this was a quiet neighborhood. Bill was also kind enough to let me know that everyone around here has pride in their gardens, lawns, and it would be a shame if I were any different. Jesus duck Bill, okay, I get it. Bill has no chill. I let him wander off with his alpha attitude and went about moving in. Dave and Beck. Dave and Beck, from over the other fence, came over just on sunset with their teenage kids, beers and pizza. Dave was a high school principal and Beck was a nurse. They asked how it went with Bill and Jenny and we had a good laugh. Dave told me how Bill comes over and gives unsolicited gardening advice. Dave, Beck and their kids were tops. All through the first day I'd seen Bill pottering around in his garden. Garden isn't the right word though. Apart from the house, their half-acre was like the local botanical gardens. Gazebo, pool, pond and all. Dave told me how Bill bragged about his rare trees and flowers and crap. Can you tell I love gardening? Honestly, grass is just something you pull up to pave or concrete over. After the first week, I'd moved in and had begun the plans for the work I wanted to do. With the title to the house had come a copy of the previous owner's application to build a deck off the rear and side of the house. Nice big deck. I stepped out the plans, decided that this big beautiful deck would do nicely, and had my people TM begin looking into whether the plans were still valid, needed updating. I'd also serviced the mower in my big shed and done the lawn, to the not-so-surreptitious scrutiny of Bill. Then it was off to the mine for 2 weeks. Each week off I'd catch up on sleep and work a bit. This went on for a few months until I got my first proper quarterly utility bill, power, water, etc. Now I could continue a habit I'd started years earlier. Just like everyone else does, when I'd moved in I recorded the power and water meter readings in my utilities diary. It's a good tool to monitor power, water usage. Comes in handy if you suspect a leak or power issues. Everyone has one, right? Now that I'd had a bill I could keep records. The issue unfolds. Month 5 I decided to replace the electrical switchboards in the house and big shed, fuse box, breaker, panel, load center, distribution board. I don't know where you live and what you call it there. To do this, I killed the power at the front main switch at the meter box. This means my whole block would have no power. While changing out the switchboards, I'd also do a full test of the electrical cabling, outlets, etc. This testing was done, by law, prior to sale, but not by me. So of course I had to check it. 2 things were weird during this time. 1. The cable over to the shed tested not as expected. 2. Bill was watering some of his flower beds by hand. There are now some readers who have guessed what the underlying corpus delicti is in this tale. Some have probably figured out what the title means. Bill's whole garden, like mine, had an automatic irrigation system. At set times and days, the whole grounds would get watered by a pump and timers. This usually happened 3 times a week around sunset. His flower beds had misters, potted plants had drippers, and the lawn had the pop-up rotating, chuck, chuck, burr, sprinklers. I wrote this out so you'd make the noise in your head. You're welcome. I'd never seen Bill water by hand with a hose. Weird. The shed circuit intimated that it either had a fault in the underground cable or it had some electrical equipment connected, even though I'd unplugged everything for testing. So, the undergrounds then. I'd have to try and find the undergrounds and investigate. This would mean pulling them out and possibly replacing them, but that could wait for tomorrow. I'd just do the house switchboard that day. Next day, I borrowed a cable locator from a mate and traced the shed undergrounds, marking with my favorite pink paint. The shed undergrounds were about 1 meter, 3 feet inside my fence line, and were fed from the power meter box at the front of the property. About halfway between the house and shed I ran into more weird. It appeared that there was a branch off the underground shed power cable. Heading into Bill's property, looking over the fence, the first thing I could see in line with this branch was Bill's little hut that housed his pool pump, filter, irrigation controls, irrigation manifolds, valves. This hut was about 3 meters, 10 feet inside his fence line. Because this cable locator also located water pipes, I found that the shed water pipe also branched at this point. Things were less weird now. After marking the whole underground services trench, I packed up the gear and went about changing out the house switchboard. And had a nice think. The plan was formed. The next day I got my people TM to look into public records of when Bill's pool and my shed had been built. I also went and bought some cameras and a recorder. The last couple of days of the week I did a few things. 1. Using surveyor's pegs hammered into the ground, I marked out where the big beautiful deck would be going. I didn't want anyone suspicious about why I'd marked the shed underground services trench. 2. I put up the cameras. One facing down the side of the house that would capture the water and power meter at the front of the property. One facing my shed, which would inadvertently capture Bill's pool hut. Perfectly legal. 3. I installed a mini power meter just for the shed circuit so I could monitor power usage to the shed. 4. I changed my irrigation timers to match Bill's. Just in case. The last thing I did before heading back to the mine was to turn the shed power circuit off and the main water valve off. Of course, the meter readings went in my utilities diary. My grounds might not be watered for 2 weeks, but sometimes you gotta break some eggs. And everything was that smug green shade anyway. It could do with being taken down a peg. When I got home the next week off, I casually went over to the meters, and wouldn't you know it, the brand new power meter for the shed had numbers on it. Mainly because it was now turned on. The water meter had a higher reading and the water valve was turned on. So, big bold Bill, huh? Just leaving this stuff on for me to find. Next I checked the cameras. 1. See Bill at his pool hut the day after I've left, looking at the irrigation system with puzzlement. 2. See Bill walking off frame, to appear on the other camera looking at the meters. See Bill turning the water and power on. 3. See Bill going back to his place, checking the irrigation system. See the sprinklers come on. I'd also had a call while at the mine from my people TM telling me that Bill's pool and my shed had gone in around the same time 10 years ago. Bill, you silly wig-wearing wanker. Phase 2 of the plan included making the hole deeper for Bill. One day when he was out in the garden, I called over to him and asked if he'd seen anyone messing around with the power, water meters. The meters were at the front of the property, like they did back in the day, to make it easier for the meter readers from the utility companies. This meant that kinda anyone could come and mess with them. Bill came over and said no. I made sure to stand in a particular spot at the fence, so this exchange was captured by the camera. When I left for the mine, I not only recorded the meter numbers and turned the power, water off, I put an out of service tag on the shed circuit and another on the water valve. These were dated and I took photos. So now we can establish just how bold Bill was, because when I got home the tags were gone, and the power, water was on again. I again went through the asking over the fence shtick. Again Bill denied any scienter. 2 chances to own up. Okie dokie, phase 3. Just so everyone is caught up, Bill had been at his property for 20 years plus. The pool and shed went in 10 years ago. The pool hut with the pump and filter and irrigation system went in at the same time. You could see that the hut had been designed to house all of it. Bill might have been knowingly stealing power and water for 10 years. He certainly had no problem stealing power and water off me. Duck Bill and all his green crap. I visited a couple of mates to pick up some items and went to work. 1. In the shed, I got the borrowed 200L, 53 gallons drum, filled it with water and emptied a 20 kilograms, 44 pounds bag of goodness into it. It took a while to stir it all in and dissolve. 2. I set up the dosing pump for the drum and ran a lead over to my irrigation system to power it and turn it on. 3. At 2 a.m., with my headlamp on, feeling all Jason Bourne, I went and turned my water off. After running the taps in the house to remove the pressure, I put some plastic down near the power, water branch for the dirt and very carefully dug a hole. 4. Exposing the water line going over to Bill's place, I fixed a tapping saddle to the water pipe. Remember, this pipe over to Bill's place was coming off my water pipe. Onto the tapping saddle I fitted the end of a length of small clear plastic tubing and filled in the hole. The grass fit back into place just nicely. 5. The plastic tubing I ran along the fence to the shed, tucked into the grass, and attached the other end to the dosing pump. The delivery system was ready. 6. After turning my water back on, I turned my taps on to repressurize the lines. 7. Then I cleaned up, went to bed. Later that day, around midday, I went next door and knocked. One last chance, Bill. Jenny answered the door, and I asked if I could have a word with them both about their pool and irrigation water, power. Jenny knew. She paused for a heartbeat and said they didn't have anything to talk about. As she was closing the door, I said that if Bill wanted to come and see me, I'd be home. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this looks like it's going to be a bit of an extreme response. Here's what I'd put up with since I moved in. 1. Bill or Jenny asking me to keep the noise of the power tools down when I was working during the day. I only ever started after 9 a.m. and finished before 5 p.m. Our houses were about 100 meters, 330 feet apart. I was disturbing their gazebo time during the day. 2. Bill and or Jenny calling the police to my place for noise complaints when I had mates over helping. The worksite radio was low, and we were just being jocular, not rowdy. Dave and Beck had no issue and came over for the BBQs. 3. Bill had one of my ducking trees cut down while I was at work, because it was too close to his fence. Yeah, okay, frangipani flowers do get kinda everywhere, but still, it had been there for years and he could have asked. 4. Bill tried to legally bully the local council into denying my big beautiful deck plans. The deck plans had again been approved by the local council. Let me say this again, Bill tried to duck with my deck. So, at about 5 p.m., Bill's irrigation turned on. And so did my dosing pump. Have you ever heard the term, salting the earth? The bag I'd emptied into the 200L, 53 gallons drum was pool salt. Sodium chloride. When Bill's irrigation turns off, the drum was empty. It had pumped all the salt water into Bill's irrigation system. 2 a.m. I Jason Bourne the tubing out of the hole, sealed the tapping saddle, and packed up. The next morning I took my mate's drum and pump back. At about 8 a.m., I started digging up the services trench, all the way from the meter box to the shed. With breaks it took the whole day. When I got to the branch that led into Bill and Jenny's place, I called them over to look at it. They denied any knowledge. I told them, that's okay, I was going to replace the cable and conduit to the shed anyway, so I'd just cut the stuff going to their place. I ended up jumping the fence and digging so I could rip the pipe and cable out of the ground on their side. A plumber mate came and helped fix my water pipe. Fallout. Bill's garden. When I was digging my trench the next morning, I could see it all, everything, wilting. If he'd gotten a heap of water on it right away the night before, who knows? Some of his rare trees may have survived. But by 8 a.m. the salt had been doing its job for 13 hours. When he saw what was happening, and figured out the cause, he connected his hose to the irrigation system and started watering. Everything turned yellow-brown. It took him months to get the plants that lived back to being healthy. He told the local horticultural society, of which he was the president, that the pool water had somehow gotten into the irrigation. Bill and Jenny, the morning after, once he'd figured out what happened, they confronted me. I denied any knowledge, and when he started threatening legal action, I told him about the tags, and video, and utilities diary, and pool, shed building documents. It drove him nuts not being able to do anything. He knew I did it. Thankfully, I had no more hassle from them. I sold the house 1 year after starting, as planned, to avoid higher taxes on the sale. I bought another house and started again. My people carrot trademark, conveyancer. Like a human conveyor belt. They move paper from one place to another. Big beautiful deck, best deck ever. It went along the whole back of the house, and halfway round one side. It was 5 meters, 16 feet wide, roofed, and had a barbecue station and sinks built in. I still miss that deck. My grounds, I managed to not kill any of my plants or stupid grass. Glossary, beer tickets. Beer tickets are money. You hand over a red beer ticket, $20 note, you get 5 beers. A blue ticket, $10 note, gets you 2 beers. These conversion rates are from years ago. I don't know what the current conversion rates are. Corpus delicti is either body of the crime or something to do with cooking. I'm pretty sure I've heard Gordon Ramsay say it before. But then, who could tell? Salting the earth. Salt kills plants. I reckon, after seeing the results of 1 bag, had I put in 3 bags, and there'd have been no recovery. Also, I'm pretty sure the soil would have needed quite a bit of remediation to ever grow anything again. It's kinda lucky for Bill that my mate only had 1 bag. I was in a bit of a mood that day. I had hoped for ground zero. Grass, 15 spots of rain and you have to cut it again. Oh look, now it needs fertilizer. Now it needs shade. Oops, too much shade. Honestly, kids are easier. I remember the time I mowed the lawn as a 10-year-old. Ran over some rocks. That was such a fun time. Mowing the lawn with bleeding legs and dad saying, that's just part of mowing the lawn, mate. To be fair, I did only have shorts and thongs on. But still, duck grass. Next one is titled, Yes, I understand it's a public street. Now, let's learn the difference between legality and civility, okay? This happened in the summer of 2016 when my wife and I moved into our new home on a tree-lined, brick street. Nice neighborhood but nothing fancy. Blue collar, working men and women. We met the neighbors, my wife made cookies and they invited us to their pool parties. We swapped foodstuffs and recipes. It was all Aussie and Harriet, until I put a fence up around our backyard for security, firstly as anyone could come off the back alley and right up onto our porch and back door. Plus, I wanted to be able to let our 2 short hair pointers out to play without having to tie them up or supervise them. Well, our neighbors didn't like that, and who can say why? It disturbed their visual routine, they were resistant to change, and they suffer from phrasetophobia? Never did find out. 3 things changed. 1, they no longer invited us to their pool parties. 2, we no longer traded cookies and pies. And lastly, they began parking in front of our house. It's a public street and you can do as you will, but my 2 spaces were constricted by a telephone pole that had guy wires coming down from it, meaning you'd have to be careful getting into and out of your car lest you scratch the paint, or worse, clothesline yourself with metal cables. So we had but one good spot that lined up our car door with the sidewalk perfectly, and that became their default parking space despite the fact that they had their spaces and a 2-car garage off the alley in the back. They also started an illicit piano lessons business, better than drums, I suppose, and apparently decided to keep their front spots open for their customers. I work odd hours and it always seemed there were a line of cars in front of both houses, so I'd end up having to park frustratingly far away, and with winter coming, trudging through the slush carrying groceries had zero appeal. So I watched and waited until one fine fall day with the leaves changing from green to vermilion and brilliant gold, and a morning chill that promised of winter soon to come, it happened. Their 3 to 5 cars, the live-at-home, unemployed daughter maintained a rotating cast of paramours, were gone, and nobody was giving piano lessons. I struck. I raced to my dad's and hitched his houseboat to his Beta farm truck and towed the combo back home, parking 80 plus of gloriously tacky redneck hardware directly in front of their house, while my vehicle took up our prime spot and most of the telephone tripwire space as well. And I left the combo there for almost 2 weeks, unmoving, and rusting loudly right in front of their front porch swing that they like to perch on in the evenings. Pressure from my wife and the impending monthly street sweeping finally led to my removing the blockade, and they've not parked in front of our place since, nor have we spoken more than 5 words in 2 years, and that's fine by us. The woman can't bake anyhow. Last one is titled, Revenge is Best Served Frozen. We don't own a car and live at the end of a cul-de-sac. I have people use my driveway all the time to turn around. It's not a huge deal to me, a little annoying when they compact the snow and it's harder to shovel, but whatever. One of my neighbors had a ride service come pick up their child every day. The van would park in my spot and begin honking at like 8 AM. I worked nights at the time. Half the time he'd be half parked on my grass. I told my neighbor that I don't overly mind my spot being used, but not if he's going to honk like that every morning, and especially not if he's going to drive over what little lawn I have every time. She spoke with him, he ignored it. I spoke with him and got, "What's your problem, man? It's not like you're using it." To which I repeated that I don't mind him using it if he stays off my grass and doesn't honk every morning. Apparently suggesting he wait till the kid notices he's there, or, God forbid, he have to drag his butt out of the car to knock on a door was just ridiculous and inhumane of me. So I left a recycle bin at the foot of my driveway. He just ran over it. I called the dispatch for the ride service and was told they are subcontractors and technically self-employed, but they will pass along the message. I wake up the next day to pounding on my door. Dude is upset. Him, "How dare you call my boss, you stupid piece of crap. What the hell is wrong with you?" Me, "Well, it's quite simple, you were told not to use my driveway if you were going drive on my lawn and wake me up every morning. Now get off my doorstep." Him, "I'll sue you if I lose my job because of you." Me, "You've been warned. Don't trespass on my driveway or property again." Dude storms off in a huff spouting obscenities etc. So this happened on a Thursday. The kids have a PD day the next day, and it's supposed to be one of those delightful Canadian weekends where it drops to like -40 Celsius. For my American friends, -40 is where Celsius and Fahrenheit meet up, so it's freaking cold. So that night, I grabbed one of my more beat-up plastic garbage bins, made sure to plug all the holes with a generous amount of duct tape, stuck a sign on it that read "Private Property, Driveway Not for Public Use," and proceeded to fill it to the brim with water. Now, before anyone thinks I'm a jerk willing to potentially endanger the other kids in the car, I'd like to point out that my neighbor's kid is the first to be picked up, so it's just him in the car. Cue Monday morning. He sees the garbage can, backs up a bit more and defiantly charges the garbage can as if to teach me a lesson, and proceeds to cause some pretty serious damage to the front end of his car. Dude gets out fuming, calls the cops and comes pounding on my door screaming about how I'm going to buy him a new car and that I'm about to be arrested. Cop, so let me make sure I understand this situation. He asked you not to park here if you couldn't refrain from honking, then warned you not to park here and put up a barrier. Now you expect him to be charged and pay for damages you caused yourself to your vehicle in an attempt to destroy his own personal property? I will never forget the look on his face when the officer said, "Yeah, that's not how this works," and turned to me and asking if I wanted to pursue charges for him damaging my personal property. I just gave him the most crap-eating grin I could muster and said, "Nah, I think we're good." I then went back inside to enjoy a morning coffee while watching him from my kitchen window as he paced back and forth in the cold waiting for a tow truck and having to call the company he worked for to explain why they needed to send out another driver to complete his route. I never saw him again. Thanks for listening.